Welcome to Conversations. I'm Muqtedar Khan, your host. And as you can see, I have with me General Sayyid Atta Hasnain. He is one of the most prominent military public opinion maker in India, extremely prolific on this issue that we are going to discuss, this Middle East crisis, humanitarian crisis, war, terrorism. He's already written 5 articles in the last 15 days. So he's a very important voice sought after, not just in India, but also internationally. We will talk about the military and intelligence aspects of this crisis today, what happened and what might happen and what its implications are for India. But before we go any further, for those of you who are watching for the first time, I invite you to subscribe to Conversations. Make sure you like the video, press the bell icon, and do share it with your friends and colleagues. And if you like the content of this channel, do consider to join this channel. The button to join is right next to the button to subscribe. General Saab, welcome to Conversations.
Thank you very much, and Jai Hind to all our viewers.
So I want to start with this issue. I was invited by a South American think tank to talk about this, and I characterized what happened as Israel's 3 failures. Number 1, failure of intelligence. Some people are characterizing it as failure of imagination, but failure of intelligence. How could Mossad not know this was going to happen? It was such an incredible attack. Not only the Five Eyes and US intelligence, who also helped, all of them seem to have missed this whole thing. So there was an intelligence failure to go. And then there was the security failure. In some places, the attackers, Hamas terrorists, had 6 to 8 hours, in some places even 12 hours before IDF showed up. Israel is so small, sir. If you were to drive a car from the furthest point to the furthest point, it would not take more than 2 hours. So I don't know what the IDF was doing for 6 hours, 8 hours. Did they come by foot? And the third thing is the failure of deterrence, which is actually the most critical thing. After 4 major wars, this is the 5th major war in 16 years between Israel, and every time Israel punishes Gaza, punishes its citizens, destroys its infrastructure. But Israel simply cannot seem to muster a deterrence against Hamas. So how do you see this? I mean, do you agree with me, or do you have other point of view on these 3 failures of Israel?
Well, Dr. Saab, I think I agree with you mostly, but perhaps on some nitty-gritties of the questions that you have put forward, we may differ here and there, but let me try and explain some of these things. One of the things, even before looking at intelligence, yes, I would look at imagination, definitely. You see, this territory of Gaza is 25 kilometers by 10 to 12 kilometers, 2.5 or 2.2 million people residing inside, thickly built up.
Yeah.
It's got an open sea face, right? So when you've got an enemy, you've fought 4 wars against a group, against a set of people, you should always expect that the 5th and the 6th will be fought with you. Don't you expect that a nation such as, or the people such as the Palestinians, the Hamas in control of all this, I differentiate between Hamas and the Palestinians, that the Hamas will not arm itself to the teeth. 2 aspects. Look at the tunneling system. Can the tunneling system be created without concrete? Where did the cement come from? Wasn't the concrete going into the Gaza Strip under control? What about all the missilery which has come? I have visited Israel 3 times, and I was briefed that Hamas and Hezbollah between them have got 130,000 missiles. I can agree that as far as Hezbollah is concerned, they've got land routes across the Levant with Iran and things like that, but Hamas does not. That means the sea route is completely open. That means the Israeli Navy was doing nothing about the sea route, not sealing it off at all. It is almost like the LTT in Sri Lanka, bringing in stores, bringing in munitions, wherewithal for fighting the Sri Lankan army at will all along the eastern coast. It's almost like that. So there were no lessons learned. Hubris is what everyone talks about, and that's been repeated all the time, everywhere. Once you stop believing, once you start believing, perhaps you could say, that you are invincible and that you will defeat your adversary every time, there may be a delay or whatever, you will start making mistakes. And these mistakes have been made. Training, I'm told, we are hearing now that training was in shambles. There was nothing such as unit and formation training in the Israeli army. So, with all this and the fact that the political system was paralyzed with all these aspects of legalities of what they wanted in the legal system to be built in, rebuilt in, etc., no lack of political consensus for so many years, elections after elections, all this keeps a nation absolutely, especially a nation of just 9 million people, tied down completely and eyes off the radar. This is what happened in 1973 to some extent. But they made up very, very quickly in 1973. Golda Meir that time at the helm, and despite the fact that the border line had been breached, they only went 10 kilometers, the Egyptians only went 10 kilometers inside, and they waited for the counterattacks to come. It came rather fast at that time. But you're right, this time they've been tardy. First of all, they decided to mobilize 350,000 people at one time. This is a progressive thing which happens. I'm not sure what is there in the mobilization system today, but there should have been crack units available immediately to be able to carry out counter tasks. And then the rest of the mobilization process could have built up on it. If you are going to wait for your complete, the humongous army to sort of build up and then start looking at carrying out operations, obviously you're going to be delayed. Now we're 17 days done. We haven't heard of the Gaza incursions or the ground incursions. I'm told something this morning, there was something in the offing, but nothing seems to have happened. And the three-phase plan, which the Israeli defense minister has spoken about, is a lot of good English. It doesn't really translate into anything. What really is going to happen on ground? Phase 1 is already underway. They're doing it. Phase 2 is essentially a drawdown from phase 1. And phase 3 is essentially a withdrawal or a climb down from the high intensity operations that they intend to follow, and then a re-administration, how to restructure Gaza in terms of post-conflict kind of a situation which they wish to handle then with a new political party, perhaps some new arrangements, and minus Hamas, which essentially means Hamas has to be decimated, completely decimated. And perhaps they're looking to fight and kill the last Hamas terrorist. Now, I'm not sure whether as a doctrine, as a strategy, that is very, very intelligent, because we know that when you get involved in the killing of the last terrorist, how difficult it is and how you end up in a mess actually trying to do that.
The issue is it's a bit more complicated. So, for example, if in order to do all of this, to dismantle the terrorist infrastructure, dismantle the terrorists, decimate them, kill the leadership, they will have to not only just go in, but also conquer and hold all of Gaza for a certain period of time, and then start hunting door to door. It reminds me of the Algerian War of Independence. The French were already in control, but they still struggled to find the terrorists. But it's not as if, you could have a person, a 20-year-old boy, doing nothing and just thinking of applying to a college somewhere in Egypt, US, or Europe, and then you bomb his home, and now he's Hamas 5 minutes later. So it's not as if there is some, the process of becoming Hamas is like this. So they could keep killing people, and the next generation could be ready to join Hamas. So I'm not very sure this idea that we will kill all terrorists is going to work. But the question I have from a military perspective on this issue is, do militaries, when they are planning such invasions or entering such a dense populated urban region, while they make plans for invasion, do they also make plans to deal with potential humanitarian crisis? And especially in the case of Gaza, there's 16,000 people per square mile. It is one of the densest places in the world. So if they're using heavy artillery and if they're going to use bombardment like they are doing right now, they are surely going to kill people. And they say that the death toll of children right now has reached 2,500 plus. So is there a like in the military doctrine, do you normally plan for minimizing humanitarian crisis or something like that?
Very good question, no doubt. And let me tell you first, let me start by saying this is not conventional war. This is hybrid war. You know, you're combining lots and lots of domains of the spectrum of war fighting, putting them together, that are prioritizing them, throwing them up in the air and catching them. This is what is going to keep happening over the next couple of months. But when armies decide to go in and capture full urban areas in a conventional mode, yes, the Indian Army, for example, has definitely got a humanitarian angle to it. I can remind you that in 1965, we were at the doorstep of Lahore, but we decided not to enter it because we felt that getting into a built-up area as large as Lahore would be suicidal. We did it with the LTT in Sri Lanka. If you remember Operation Pawan, we went in from 5 directions. One of the major things in that was avoidance of civilian casualties. And the Indian Army is very adept at that. They always, in fact, mostly go in with their hands tied behind their back. You'll be surprised. Even before we completed the operations, a high-profile brigadier who became a lieutenant general in the army later was flown in from Delhi into Jaffna immediately to take control of the administration of the Jaffna city, because they felt that there would be a complete breakdown in administration and humanitarian situations would worsen. The Indian Army always keeps that principle in mind. I'm not sure if too many other armies in the world do that. And particularly is the Israeli army, which is smaller comparatively, and the size is smaller. Like 330,000, 350,000 isn't a small size that way, but definitely the overall representation in terms of ratio is much, much higher here. And therefore, the desperation for early completion of operations will be there. The fact that they are already ordering North Gaza to be vacated, hoping that they will vacate it and then leaving it to Hamas that whatever casualties take place will be your responsibility, the Israeli army then would have no other option but to go in. And the humanitarian consideration would be there in mind, but definitely would not be a preponderant thought. So victory will be what it is. They will go in. It's going to be house to house. It's going to be street to street. I can tell you from my experience of Sri Lankan operations that there will be a lot of explosives used, a lot of improvised explosive devices, mines. I'm not sure how adept the Israeli army is today in infantry tank cooperation together. You have to move very close together. Tanks and the infantry have to move virtually hand in glove together, because otherwise you will find Hamas terrorists coming out of all kinds of crevasses here and there, out of the tunnel system, and taking pot shots at tanks from behind with anti-tank guns and things like that. This is the kind of thing which is going to happen over the next couple of days. There are multi-storied buildings still standing there. How do you take control of multi-storied buildings? You will have to carry out virtual counter-terrorist operations inside those buildings to make sure that they are vacated. Now, this is going to take a fair amount of time. Not only are they going to impose casualties, but I fear the Israeli army will suffer a lot of casualties here too.
Sir,
that is the problem.
Plus, in addition to that, there are thousands and thousands of miles of tunnels. And it is quite possible that there are hostages in the tunnels wherever they are hiding. So there's also this fear that Israel might kill hostages if it tries to take out these buildings and these tunnels. So in many ways, if Israel is interested in rescuing the hostages, then it also means that one of their hands is at least tied behind their back. So this is like a humanitarian disaster.
May I just answer that aspect? I still believe that the Israelis will not do anything till this whole issue of the hostages is resolved in some way, or unless surgically they have been able to go in and take out a large number of them and take them out of Gaza, which is going to be a very, very challenging thing, of course, because allowing the hostages to to be taken up, I mean, the sense to die in the hands of the Hamas, is something which politically within Israel may just not be acceptable. The small populated countries of this kind, obviously the public has very, very strong convictions about these kind of things, and there will be tremendous pressure on the government for this.
I mean, there are more than 200 and I think 12 hostages, and
Yes.
nearly there are American hostages too. Blinken was saying that potentially 10. He was also worried that some might have died and the bodies have not yet discovered. And then there are other foreign. I was speaking with a scholar from Italy last night, and he was saying that there are 2 Italians also who are among the hostages. But the hostages are going to be very critical. If you remember the Gilad Shalit thing, that Israelis released about 1,000 plus Palestinians in exchange for one Israeli soldier. But there's also this case of 2 currently Israelis that the Hamas has been holding for several years, who they have not exchanged. So it is quite possible that I mean, I don't know how desperate Netanyahu is for a major victory in Gaza, or is he interested in satisfying his own public, because there were already protests yesterday to replace him. I want to ask you this question. I mean, how much of this relates to India? I fear that when ISIS was winning battles in Iraq and Syria, it had this demonstration effect which increased its recruitment. So people from all over the world were volunteering to go and fight with ISIS because it was successful. So this attack by Hamas, do you think it could motivate more kids all over the world, especially in, say, people might be interested in joining Lashkar at-Taiba or Jaish-e-Mohammed, and thinking that they can do such a thing to India? Do you think that this raises the bar of security and counterterrorism preparedness for Indian military and intelligence?
Let me start by telling you that I consider that in this entire episode since the 7th of October, the ISIS hand is very much evident. There's no doubt that the ISIS was, it went into some kind of a network state, and then went into Sri Lanka, southern India, Philippines, ultimately ended up in Afghanistan. And we know from Afghanistan, it has also gone beyond. I fear some elements of the ISIS are definitely hand in glove with Hamas, probably advising them, probably creating plans for them. Because you can see the level of desperation, the level of brutality. Hamas has been involved in brutality in the past also, but not to this level. So it seems that the ISIS doctrine has entered here into the Hamas doctrine. Now, that's a very dangerous thing. Now, whether this is going to successfully draw international fighters, in the case of Hamas, there were 40,000 fighters who were drawn to it through Turkey, Syria, in different directions, and came in and joined them in Mosul and cities like that.
Yeah,
This
in the case of
time
ISIS,
it seems,
yeah.
yes, this
Yeah.
time it seems to be a little different. First of all, Hamas's brutality has gone out on the air. It's gone around all over the world. People are seeing it. There are demonstrations in Western countries by diaspora, Muslim diasporas, and things like that. But so far, there has not been a kind of an upsurge in the Islamic world. Even the Arab countries, you see, have been quiet comparatively. Even Iran has been comparatively quiet, I would say, as compared to what it could have been. Otherwise, very, very energetic about supporting the Hamas and things like that. They have been generally quiet. So that is why I still think that we have time to sort of look at, because nothing really serious is happening in that manner. Pakistan. Within Pakistan, there have been some statements, one off here and there, which appear to show as if, and Pakistan, you find copycat kind of activities always take place, copycat terrorism, copycat kind of doctrines are taken out from here and there. And that is my fear, that some kind of a thing like this, the typical raid across, in this case, the raid in southern Israel across from the Gaza Strip was across the wire obstacles and to a depth of about 3 to 5 kilometers. And these villages and cities which were there, townships which were there, they were the ones who were raided. We've got similar things all along the Western Front, from Sir Creek right up to Kashmir. We've got towns and villages, but not so close to the international border. Perhaps in Punjab, northern Rajasthan, we have some of them. The Jammu sector, we've got lots of them. This kind of a thing could happen. And therefore, I'm not saying that it will happen, but some kind of a maverick leadership somewhere could be thinking of planning this kind of a thing to gain international importance. The Lashkar-e-Toiba is one organization, the Jamaat-ul-Dawa as it's called, which is always looking for this kind of a prominence. Jaish-e-Mohammed is similarly looking for this kind of a prominence. They would be the ones I would suspect who would be looking at trying to plan this out. After all, 26/11, 10 men, well trained, rehearsed in conditions which were very alike, came across the seas and managed to hold Mumbai to ransom for the better part of 4 days, almost 5 days. So I would not put it out of my imagination, because I think after the Israeli experience, imagination is a very important aspect. We've got to perceive what kind of things can happen against us. And I think this is the possibility of something like this happening with now drone capability, the ability to smuggle in weapons. Very much you are seeing powered motors, these aerial systems of being able to move inside, etc. All these have added to the whole game of transportation. So all you need is about 10, 20, 30 terrorists. And they move in, get onto a road somewhere, hijack a couple of vehicles and start fanning out 3 to 4, 5 people into different townships, and you will have an area of 30, 40 kilometers which will be aflame completely. Now that is the kind of specter I look at.
So that means that the cost of security has gone up for not just India, but other countries who fear terrorism. Like, I'm sure that this is something that the Indian Army is thinking already of, and so they might already have more deployments, more security, isn't it?
We have a very strong counter-infiltration grid in Kashmir, which is an area where I suspect this kind of a thing will not happen. But down south from there, maybe in the Jammu sector, Punjab, even in Rajasthan in some areas, we only have a border guarding role at the moment with the border security force essentially there in certain border outposts which are far wide apart from each other. So I don't think that we are going to immediately get into the mode of deployment or mobilization or something like that. That may be an overkill, but definitely intelligence systems and Indian intelligence systems have been very good so far. Ever since 26/11, we have not had a major incident except in Jammu and Kashmir, including Pathankot, Uri, Nagrota, all were in Jammu and Kashmir essentially. But ever since 26/11, we have not had a major terrorist incident in India. So to that extent, the Indian intelligence services have done very well. All you need to is perhaps redouble the efforts and have the response capability. As you very correctly pointed out in the beginning, the Israelis seem to have gone very tardy in their response capability. And that is something we need to make sure.
I was watching a show in which General Shukla, along with Colonel Bakshi, who is from the intelligence wing of the Indian defense, they were talking about it, and General Shukla was propounding a theory. He said that the manner in which Hamas attacked Israel, first launching rockets and then breaching the $1 billion security fence, and the manner in which they were shuttling the hostages. It seems that the fighters kidnapped people, brought them back, and then they came back. It appeared that he was basically suggesting that this is beyond the capabilities, the practical, not just execution capabilities, but planning capabilities of a non-state actor, implying that perhaps the entire operation, to the minute details that it was executed, could have has the suggestion that this was planned by a very sophisticated military establishment. So he was obviously, then he clearly mentioned Iran and says that he sees Iran's hand in this entire planning. That was the same suggestion made about 9/11, that the manner in which those 19 terrorists, when they came into the US and were able to avoid the US counterterrorism surveillance, etc., they must have undergone training by a state actor because non-state actors do not have that capacity to train. Do you think all that has changed? I mean, do you think that this was an entirely Hamas act, or was it backed by some state actor?
Let me yes analyze this. Uh, First of all, to say that Hamas is non-state may be an understatement because Hamas is, after all, the whole of Gaza is controlled by Hamas, and
Yes.
Hamas is in governance. Well, Hamas is elected, so I would say Hamas is a quasi non-state
Yeah,
actor,
it's more than a.
and therefore in control of everything. Secondly, they are in receipt of finances. I mean, from Qatar, $1 billion have been permitted by the Netanyahu government itself to reach the portals of Hamas. So money was never a problem. And as far as manpower is concerned, trained manpower is concerned, if you can train 20 men, you can train 100 men in different locations. If the intelligence and surveillance system of Israel could be defeated in 2, 3 locations, it can be defeated in many other locations. So it appears that definitely the advisories must have been there. That is why I said it seems to me as if an ISIS hand was there in this. ISIS was known for its planning capabilities. After all, you saw the sophisticated social media campaign, the Beak, the magazine, the colorful magazine that they had taken out,
Yeah.
the manner in which they attracted people from all over the world. All this was a part of organizational capability, in which we said that it was the Ba'athist Party, the elements of the Ba'athist Party, the Republican Guard, and all that which was morphed together to become ultimately ISIS. So they came with a tremendous experience. The ability to hold on in Mosul for 6 months was something amazing. So I do think even more than Iran. Perhaps Iran would definitely have a hand out here, but even more than that, I suspect the ISIS hand and ISIS organizational capability, I continue to suspect is definitely behind this.
There was one hint and some chatter, and I shouldn't be repeating it because it was not confirmed, but they said that some of the weaponry used by Hamas looked like the one that the US had left behind in Afghanistan.
M3, yes, I think the M3, M4
Yeah.
rifles were the ones, almost 600,000 of them were left behind in
Yeah.
Afghanistan, along with a couple of hundred aircraft and lots of tanks and things like that. Those have found their way into Kashmir too. We have found some of them in Kashmir. Lots of them are in Pakistan, in the hands of the Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan. And obviously, the funding of the Taliban itself is being done through the sale of all this weaponry which is going around the world. So I'm sure much of it has gone into Central Asia. Some of the terrorist groups in Central Asia probably are also holding this. One thing, Dr. Khan, I would tell you that in today's world, seems to be no obstacle to the movement of weapons, drugs, money, or human beings.
Yeah.
It seems that they can move anywhere at will. And this confirms it. The manner in which everything has come into Hamas territory, in the hands of Hamas, right under the surveillance of the Israelis.
Yeah, I mean, some people feel that this must have taken at least 2 years to plan, and some feel that this was definitely done in at least several months. But things are really, really getting terrible. Sir, my last question to you, if by a chance you had a chance to advise Netanyahu, what would you advise Netanyahu on the ground incursion? Should he make this? I think it would be a big mistake for him to invade because even if he decimated Hamas, which is not technically possible because it is not a finite entity, but holding on to Gaza, then who will govern Gaza? It will become a bigger nightmare than it probably is right now. It could be led by many small gangs like Islamic Jihad and others. So I think they need to be able to imagine what will come in Gaza after Hamas. But what do you think? What advice would you give to
You
Nathan?
have to look at the history of this, Dr. Khan. See, in 4 wars that the Israelis fought with the Arabs, in the 4 to 5 wars that they fought against the Hamas, Israel has invariably won militarily,
Yeah.
but has lost out diplomatically and strategically. It is almost like Sri Lanka, where I say what a marvelous job the Sri Lankan army did in defeating the LTTE, but what a terrible job the nation, so the Sri Lankan nation did in attempting to find peace, final peace with the LTT. I continue to still hold that one fine day there will once again be a return to war between the LTT and Sri Lankan army. So it's a very similar thing here. Having gone through this process of 4 to 5, 6, 7 wars all these years, the one lesson which emerges is exactly the advice you're wanting me to give to Mr. Netanyahu, that actually getting into Gaza is going to be a quagmire for him, and it's unlikely that he's going to end up in a conflict termination on his terms. It's unlikely that there's going to be even a military victory. But I dare say that at the end of it, a state such as Israel, small, surrounded by many adversaries and potential adversaries, perhaps may have very little options than just to go military, to go the military way. After having suffered 1,300, 1,400 fatalities in a nation of that size, I don't think a political leadership can even think of surviving if it does not retaliate. And it will retaliate for certain. That's why we have not seen the end of this. We are going to see much more happening in this area of West Asia.
You know, I know I said that was the last question, but can Israel learn from India's Kashmir experience, where India has tried to isolate the extremists and has tried to invest in the state, in its economy, in its development, so that people are happy? I mean, imagine some 12,000 crore, I don't know how many, 12 crore tourists went to Kashmir in this last one and a half.
Very large number, yes.
Yes, very large number.
Very large number.
Yeah. So the point is that that brings wealth, that brings prosperity, that brings jobs. And so if you have a job and if you have a future, if you are a 22-year young man and you have a steady income, you're thinking of getting married, of children, of buying a house. So these mundane little dreams, I think, are your biggest assets as counterterrorism. If you can give ordinary dreams to people, get a job, get married, have children, have your own home, that side of it is completely missing, I think, in this in the manner in which Israel deals.
Dr. Muqtedar, what happens is that lots and lots of people draw me into discussions on the similarities in their mind, similarities between Jammu and Kashmir, the situation there, and the Palestinian-Israeli issue. I think there is no similarity. There's a lot of difference in this. First of all, we have put our army there. When control was lost in 1989, we came into it with all guns blazing at the conflict initiation stage. We had very little army there. The army then moved in. We raised 63 battalions of the Rashtra Rifles, which were the main counterterrorism force. And these are the units, along with the BSF at that time, later the CRPF, the Jammu and Kashmir Police, an integrated, wholesome force which managed to hold this militarily to a great extent. Along with the military holding of Jammu and Kashmir was this Winning Hearts and Minds campaign, which started in 1997. It really went places. You know, lots and lots of goodwill schools, education facilities, tours all over India, cricket matches, promotion of sports, all kinds of cultural activities. It made a difference. I won't say it made a huge difference, but it made a difference. And the message was very clear. The Kashmiri is not our adversary. It is the terrorist. It is the separatist who is the adversary. That this is what Israel will have to learn to differentiate. The problem in Gaza is they are not differentiating between the common Palestinian and the Hamas terrorists. We differentiated with that to perfection virtually. And that is why we could isolate people. Finally, on August the 5th, 2019, when we took the decision, that's the time, for some time, there was a bit of a stranglehold, a military stranglehold. Internet was down. We got the separatists out from there, put an end to stone throwing, got all the networks under control. When all that happened, we started the development process, the all of government approach, so to say. And so this is an ideal model. It's really an ideal model. We are not yet completely over the hump. There is still a long way to go, but definitely we are on the right path at the moment. Israel will have to go very far in changing its mindset. But I still, once again, advise that I don't think we can really compare the two situations. They are virtually apples and oranges.
General Saab, thank you very much for your enlightening analysis. As always, it is always a learning experience talking to you. My students also love to listen to you, and we discuss parts of your shows they watch. I've had a couple of students actually come and talk about one of our conversations in great detail. So it is very inspiring, and of course, the comment section always is like, oh my God, Doctor, you brought General Hasnain. And sometimes there are requests as to why haven't you invited him as such. So thank you very much once again for joining Conversation. It's always an honor to talk to you. And I hope I will make sure that I send this video to people in the US government, in the Senate, in the Department of Defense.
Thank you very much, Dr. Muqtedar. It's a pleasure, absolutely, conversing with you. My only wish and prayer is that I hope we don't get too many opportunities to discuss further. We want to see an end to all this
as soon as
happening
possible.
in West Asia, in Israel, Palestine, between the Israelis and the Palestinians. There's been too much of bloodletting there, and I think it's about time we found peace in that area.
I mean, this year has been bad in terms of global peace with the war in Ukraine and the tensions near Taiwan. I hope that peace prevails. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.